Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Flight of the Fat Lady. On Halloween morning, Harry awoke with a rest and went down for breakfast, feeling thoroughly depressed, though doing his best to act normally. "We're bringing lots of sweets back from Honeydukes," said Hermione, looking desperately sorry for him. "Yeah, lots," said Ron. He and Hermione had finally forgotten the squabble about Crookshanks in the face of Harry's disappointment. "Don't worry about me," said Harry, in what he hoped was an offhand voice. "I'll see you at the feast. Have a good time." He accompanied them to the entrance hall, where Filch, the caretaker, was standing inside the front doors, checking off names against a long list, peering suspiciously into every face, and making sure that no one was sneaking out who shouldn't be going. "Staying here, Potter," shouted Malfoy, who was standing in the line with Crabbe and Goyle. "Scared of passing the Dementors?" Harry ignored him and made his solitary way up the marble staircase, through the deserted corridors, back to Gryffindor Tower. "Password?" said the fat lady, jerking out of a doze. "Fortuna Major," said Harry listlessly. The portrait swung open and he climbed through the hole into the common room. It was full of chattering first and second years, and a few older students who had obviously visited Hogsmeade so often that novelty had worn off. "Harry! Harry! Hi, Harry!" It was Colin Creevy, a second year who was deeply in awe of Harry and never missed an opportunity to speak to him. "Aren't you going to Hogsmeade, Harry?" "Why not?" "Hey!" Colin looked eagerly around at his friends. "You can come and sit with us if you like, Harry." No, thanks, Colin," said Harry, who wasn't in the mood to have a lot of people staring avidly at the sky of the floor. I've got to go to the library. Got to get some work done." After that, he had no choice but to turn right around and head back out the portrait hole again. "What was the point of waking me up?" the fat lady called grumpily after him as he walked away. Harry wandered desperately towards the library, but halfway there he changed his mind. He didn't feel like walking. He turned around and came face to face with Filch, who was obviously just seen off the last of the Hogsmeade visitors. "What are you doing?" Filch snarled suspiciously. "Nothing," said Harry truthfully. "Nothing," spat Filch, his jaw squaring unpleasantly. "A likely story. Sneaking around on your own. Why aren't you in Hogsmeade buying stink pellets and belch powder and whizzing worms like the rest of your nasty little friends?" Harry shrugged. "Well, get back to your common room where you belong," snapped Filch, and he stood glaring until Harry had passed out of sight. But Harry didn't go back to the common room. He climbed the staircase, thinking vigorously of avoiding the Owlery to see Hedwig, and was walking around another corridor when a voice from inside one of the rooms said, "Harry?" Harry doubled back to see who had spoken, and met Professor Lupin, looking around off his door. "What are you doing?" said Lupin, in a very different voice from Filch. "Where are Ron and Hermione?" "Hogsmeade," said Harry in a would-be casual voice. "Ah," said Lupin. He considered Harry for a moment. "Why don't you come in? I've just taken delivery of a Grindylow for our next lesson." "A what?" He followed Lupin into his office. In the corner stood a very large tank of water. A sickly green creature with sharp little horns had its face pressed against the glass, pulling faces and flexing its long, spindly fingers. "What a demon," said Lupin, surveying the Grindylow thoughtfully. "We shouldn't have much difficulty with him, not after the Capus. The trick is to break his grip. You notice the abnormally long fingers, strong but very brittle. The Grindylow bared its green teeth and then buried itself in a tangle of wheat in a corner. "Cup of tea?" Lupin said, looking around for his kettle. "I was just thinking of making one." "All right," said Harry awkwardly. Lupin tapped the kettle with his wand and a blast of steam issued suddenly from the spout. "Sit down," said Lupin, taking the lid off a dusty tin. "I've only got tea bags, I'm afraid, but I dare say you've had enough of tea leaves." Harry looked at him. Lupin said quickly. "How did you know about that?" Harry asked. "Professor McGonagall told me," said Lupin, passing Harry a chipped mug of tea. "You're not worried, are you?" "No," said Harry. He thought for a moment of telling Lupin about the dog he'd seen in Magnolia Crescent, but he decided not to. He didn't want Lupin to think he was a coward, especially since Lupin had already seemed to think he couldn't cope with a boggart. Something of Harry's thoughts seemed to have shown on his face, because Lupin said, "Anything worrying you, Harry?" "No," Harry lied. He drank a bit of tea and watched the Grindylow brandishing its a fist at him. Yes, he said suddenly, putting his tea down on Lupin's desk. You know that day we thought the ball good? Yes, said Lupin slowly. Why didn't you let me fight it? Said Harry abruptly. Lupin raised his eyebrows. I would have thought it was obvious, Harry, he said, sounding surprised. Harry, who had expected Lupin to deny what he'd done anything, was taken aback. Why? He said again. Well, said Lupin, frowning slightly, I assumed what if the ball faced you? It was assumed the shape of Lord Voldemort. Harry stared. Not only was his the last answer he'd expected, but Lupin had said Voldemort's name. The only person Harry had ever heard the name aloud, apart from himself, was Professor Dumbledore. Clearly, if I was wrong, said Lupin, still frowning at Harry, but I didn't think it a good idea for Lord Voldemort to materialize in the staff room. I imagined that people would panic. I did think of Voldemort first, said Harry honestly, but then I remembered those domestics. I see, said Lupin thoughtfully. Well, I'm impressed. He smiled slightly at the look of surprise on Harry's face. That suggests that what you fear the most of all is fear. Very wise, Harry. Harry didn't know what to say to that. He drank some more tea. So you've been thinking that I didn't believe you capable of fighting the Boggart? Said Lupin shrewdly. Well, yeah, said Harry. He was suddenly feeling a lot happier. Professor Lupin, you know the dimension. He was interrupted by a knock on the door. Come in, called Lupin. The door opened and in came Snape. He was carrying a goblet, which was smoking faintly and stopped at the side of Harry, his black eyes narrowing. Ah, Severus, said Lupin, smiling. Thanks very much. Could you please leave it here on the desk for me? Snape set the smoking goblet down, his eyes wandering between Harry and Lupin. I was just showing Harry my Grindylow, said Lupin presently, pointing at the tank. Fascinating, said Snape without looking at it. You should drink that directly, Lupin. Yes, I will, said Lupin. I made an entire cauldron full, Snape continued. If you need more, I should probably take some again tomorrow. Thanks very much, Severus. Not at all, said Snape, but there was a look in his eye that Harry didn't like. He backed out of the room and smiling and watchful. Harry looked closely at the goblet. Lupin smiled. Professor Snape has very kindly concocted a potion for me, he said. I have never been much of a potion brewer, and this one is particularly complex. He picks up the bottle and sniffed it. Bitter sugar makes it useless, he added, taking a sip and shuddering. Why? Harry began. Lupin looked at him and answered the unfinished question. I've been feeling a bit of color, he said. This potion is the only thing that helps. I am very lucky to be working alongside Professor Snape. There aren't many wizards who are up to making it. Professor Lupin took another sip and Harry had a mad urge to knock the goblet out of his hands. Professor Snape is very interested in the dark arts, he blurted out. Really? Said Lupin, looking very madly interested as he took another gulp of potion. Some people reckoned, Harry hesitated, then plunged recklessly on. Some people reckoned he'd do anything to get their defense against the dark arts job. Lupin drained the goblet and pulled a face. Disgusting, he said. Well, Harry, I'd better get back to work. I'll see you at the feast later. Right, said Harry, putting his empty teacup down. The empty goblet was still smoking. There you go, said Ron, who got as much as he could carry. A shower of brilliantly colored sweets fell into Harry's lap. It was dusk, and Ron and Hermione had just turned up in the common room, pink-faced from the cold wind and looking as though they'd had the time of their lives. Thanks, said Harry, picking up a packet of tiny black pepper imps. What's Hogsmeade like? Where did you go? By the sound of it, everywhere. Darish and benches, the wizard and equipment shop, Zonka's joke shop, into the 3 broomsticks and 30 mugs of hot butterbeer and making places and many places besides. The post office, Harry, about 200 dolls, all sitting on shelves and all colored depending on how fast you want your letter to get there. Honeydukes have got a new kind of fudge. They were giving out free samples. There's a bit, look. We think we saw an ogre. Honestly, they get all sorts at the 3 broomsticks. Wish we had have brought you some butterbeer. Really wears you up. What did you do? Said Hermione, looking anxious. Did you get any work done? No, said Harry. Lupin made me a cup of tea in his office, and then Snape came in. He told him all about the goblet. Ron's mouth fell open. Lupin drank it? He gasped. Is he mad? Hermione checked her watch. We'd better go down, you know. The feast will be started in 5 minutes. They hurried through the portrait hall and into the crowd, but discussing Snape. But if he, Hermione dropped her voice, glancing nervously around. If he was trying to poison Lupin, he wouldn't have done it in front of Harry. Yeah, maybe, said Harry as they reached the entrance hall and crossed into the great hall. It had been decorated with hundreds and hundreds of candle-filled cupcakes, a cloud of fluttering live bats, and many flaming orange steamers, which were swimming lazily across the stormy ceiling like brilliant water snakes. The food was delicious. Even Hermione and Ron, who were full to bluster with honeydew sweets, managed second helping of everything. Harry kept glancing at the staff table. Professor Lupin looked cheerful as well as he ever did. He was talking animatedly to a tiny little Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher. He removed his eyes along the table to the place where Snape sat. Was he imagining it, or were Snape's eyes fixed, flickering towards Lupin more often than natural? The feast finished with an entertainment provided by the Hogwarts ghosts. They poured out of the walls and tables to do a spot of formation gliding. Nearly headless Snake, the Gryffindor ghost had a very success with enhancement of his own body beheading. It had been such a good evening that Harry's good mood couldn't even be spoiled by Malfoy, who shouted through the crowd as they all left the hall. The Dementors said their love, Potter. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of the Gryffindors along the usual path to Gryffindor Tower, but then they reached the corridor which ended with the portrait of the fat lady they found it jammed with students. Why isn't anyone going in? Said Ron curiously. Harry peered over the hats in front of him. The portrait seemed to be close. Let me through, please, came Percy's voice as he came bustling importantly through the crowd. What's the hold up here? You can't all have forgotten the password. Excuse me, I'm a hat boy. And then as the silence fell over the crowd from the front fist so that chill seemed to spread out the corridor, they heard Percy say in a suddenly sharp voice, "Somebody get Professor Dumbledore, quick!" People's heads turned. Those at the back were standing on tiptoe. "What's going on?" said Ginny, who had just arrived. Next moment, Professor Dumbledore was there, sweeping towards the portrait. The Gryffindors squeezed together to let him through, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer to see what the trouble was. "Oh my!" Hermione exclaimed as he grabbed Harry's arm. The fat lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. Dumbledore took one quick to look at the ruined painting and turned his eyes somber to see Professor McGonagall, Lupin, and Snape hurrying towards him. "We need to find her," said Dumbledore. "Professor McGonagall, please go to Mr. Filch at once and tell him to search every painting in the castle for the fat lady." "You'll be lucky," said a cackling voice. It was Peeves, the poltergeist, bobbing over the crowd and looking delighted, as he always did, at the sight of wreckage or worry. "What do you mean, Peeves?" said Dumbledore calmly, and Peeves' grins faded a little. He didn't dare to hope Dumbledore. Instead, he adopted an only voice that was no better than his cackle. "Ashamed, your headship, sir. Doesn't want to be seen. She's a horrible mess. Saw her running through the landscape up on the fourth floor, still dodging between the trees, crying something dreadful. He said happily, 'Poor thing,'" he added unconvincingly. Did she say who did it?" said Dumbledore quietly. "Oh yes, Professor Hat," said Peeves with an air once cradling a large bombshell in his arms. "He got very angry when she wouldn't let him in, you see." Peeves flew over and grinned at Dumbledore from between his own legs. "Nasty temper he's got, that serious black."